Welcome to the lecture on adding and subtracting real numbers. Here are the beginning two rules that we're going to use when we add signed numbers. If you're trying to add two numbers that have alike signs, so they're both positive or they're both negative, you're basically going to be adding the absolute values of the numbers, and the sum will have the same sign as the given numbers. So for example, if I just wanted to add 2 plus 3, you're just going to add 2 plus 3 and get 5, and since both of these numbers were positive, our answer stays positive. However, if I wanted to add 2 plus negative 3, we're still going to add just the 2 and the 3. That's what I mean by absolute value. Ignore the sign initially. 2 and 3 adds to 5, but this time because the two numbers were both negative, our answer is going to be negative. Now what do you do if the two signs are opposites to begin with? So if we have 2 plus negative 3, for example, well in that case you're going to subtract or find the difference between the larger absolute value and the smaller one, and then the sum will have the answer with of the larger absolute value. So what that means is if you have 2 plus negative 3, ignore the signs initially. Since the signs were opposite, we want to subtract. Take the bigger number minus the smaller number. 3 minus 2 is 1. And then you're going to have the answer be the same sign as the bigger number. So in this case, 3 was larger and it was negative, so our answer is going to be negative. If I had negative 2 plus 3, the two signs are opposites. 2 is negative and 3 is positive. So that's how we know to actually subtract. Take the bigger number minus the smaller number. 3 minus 2 is 1. And the sign of the bigger number is going to be the sign of our answer. Since 3 is larger and it's positive, our answer 1 is going to be positive as well. So let's practice this. If we have negative 12 plus negative 16, these are two numbers with the same sign. They're both negative, so we're actually going to be adding the two numbers together. 12 plus 16 is 28. However, since both numbers were negative, my answer is going to stay negative. So my answer is negative 28. If I have 4 plus negative 8, this time the 4 is positive, the 8 is negative, so they're opposite signs. So this is when we subtract. Take the bigger number, the 8, and subtract the smaller number, the 4. So 8 take away 4 is 4. And our sign of our answer is going to be the sign of the larger number. 8 is bigger, and it was negative, so our answer is going to be negative 4. In the next example, we have a little bit of order of operations or grouping going on. So order of operations says to do what's in the parentheses first. So I'm going to do these brackets first. 3 plus negative 11. Positive 3 plus a negative 11. So there's opposite signs, so we want to be subtracting. 11 take away 3 is 8, and since the 11 is larger and it's negative, the answer is going to be negative 8. Once we get that negative 8, we want to add to it the 7 that was on the outside. So now we have a positive 7 and a negative 8, so different signs, so we subtract. 8 take away 7 is 1, and since 8 is larger and it was negative, our answer is going to stay negative. So our answer is negative 1. On the next example, we have some fractions. We have 9/10 plus negative 3/5, a positive plus a negative. So we want to actually be subtracting here. However, we've got fractions, and the one rule you need to remember about fractions is whenever you're adding or subtracting fractions, you must have common denominators. So that's the first thing I need to do here. If I have 10 and 5 in my denominator, the common denominator wants to be 10. So I'm going to change both of these fractions into fractions with a 10 in the denominator. And since 9/10 already has a 10, I don't need to do anything to that first fraction. However, the second fraction had a 5. To go from 5 to 10, I would have to multiply the bottom by 2 to balance it out. I also need to multiply the top by 2, and 3 times 2 would be 6. So 3/5 is the same as 6/10, and remember this was negative. So now I have a positive 9/10 plus a negative 6/10. A positive and a negative means I want to subtract. So 9 take away 6 would be 3, and the 10 in the denominator stays put. And since the 9 is larger and it was positive, my answer is going to stay positive. So our final solution, 3/10. In the next example, we have those brackets again. So using order of operations, I'm going to solve this problem first, then this one, and then I'm going to add the two results together. So a -5 plus a -4. They're both negative, so we're actually going to be adding the two numbers together. 5 plus 4 is 9, and the answer stays negative since they were both negative. 9 plus -2, this time we have a positive plus a negative, so we subtract. 9 take away 2 is 7. The 9 is larger and it was positive, so 7 stays positive. And then in between these we have that plus sign. So now the problem becomes -9 plus a 7. A negative plus a positive means subtract. 9 take away 7 would be 2, and since the 9 is larger and it's negative, our answer is going to stay negative. So -2. In the next couple of examples, we're going to be doing some translating first. We're going to take our English phrase here and translate it into a mathematical expression, and then we're going to simplify. So we want the sum of -3 and 5 and -12. So sum means add, and here we're actually adding three numbers, -3 and 5 and -12. So that's just going to look like -3 plus 5 plus -12. Now when we add three numbers, remember order of operations says to go from left to right. So I'm going to do these two first. A -3 plus a +5, we want to subtract there because the signs are opposites. So 5 take away 3 is 2. The 5 was bigger and it's positive, so 2 should stay positive. And now that we got that 2, we're going to add in that -12. 2 plus -12, again the signs are opposites, so we subtract. 12 take away 2 is 10. And 12 is larger this time and it's negative, so our answer should stay negative. So -10 is our solution. The next example, it says 10 more than the sum of -4 and -5. So more than means added to. So we want 10 added to this sum. So right away we're going to have 10 added to, or 10 more than, some stuff, some sum. And this sum is -4 plus -5. If you really wanted to have parentheses around that sum, you could. Because this is all addition between these three numbers, those parentheses really aren't necessary. So this is really just 10 plus -4 plus -5. Going left to right, 10 plus a -4 when we subtract, because the signs are opposite, 10 take away 4 is 6, and it's going to be a +6 because we have 10 being the larger number. Now we want to add to that -5. Again, the signs are opposite, so we subtract. 6 take away 5 is 1. 6 is larger and it's positive, so our answer is positive. So we get 1 for an answer. Okay, so those are the rules for adding positive and negative numbers. Now we're going to talk about subtracting positive and negative numbers. And the good news is there isn't really a new rule. The definition of subtraction, if you have, for example, x minus y, that's defined to be an addition problem. It's x plus the opposite of y. So all we have to do to subtract real numbers is first change them to addition of the opposite and then follow the same two rules that we've been using in the above examples. So for example, if I want 8 minus 13, you can change this right away into 8 plus -13, 8 plus the opposite. And now this is an addition problem just like the ones we were doing. We have a +8 and a -13, different signs, so we subtract. 13 take away 8 is 5, and since 13 is bigger and it's negative, our answer is going to be -5. If I have -12 minus 5, you can initially change this to a negative 12 plus the opposite of 5, so negative 12 plus negative 5. This time we're adding two negative numbers. Since the signs are the same, we actually add 12 and 5 to get 17, and since they were both negative, our answer is negative. On the next example here, we have 13 minus negative 3. Now when you change this to an addition problem, it becomes 13 plus the opposite of negative 3. The opposite of negative 3 becomes positive 3. So you'll notice that a lot of times when we see a double negative like this, what I like to do is immediately change a minus minus to a plus plus. They cancel each other out. So this subtraction of a negative 3 just became addition by positive 3. So 13 plus 3 is just 16. So for example, in the next problem, when I see that double negative right away, instead of writing a whole extra step, I just change this to plus plus, because those minuses are going to cancel each other out. So this is just 3/4 plus a half. Now remember, these are fractions, and we can't add fractions unless we have a common denominator, which in this problem wants to be 4. So we can leave 3/4 as it is, but we would need to change 1/2 into a new fraction with a 4 in the bottom. You'd have to multiply 2 by 2 to get 4, so if I multiply the top by 2 as well, I'll get 2/4. And we all know that 2/4 is the same as 1/2. Now that the denominators are the same, we can add. 3/4 plus 2/4 becomes 5/4. You only add the numerator, you leave the denominator the same. Okay, in the next example, more order of operations. We've got brackets, and then within the brackets we have some parentheses. So that's where you want to start. I'm going to start right here. If you really want to, you can take an extra step and change this to an addition problem, negative 3 plus negative 10. The way I look at this is I just see a negative 3 and a negative 10, and I see that they're both negative. So really I want to be adding the two numbers together. 3 and 10 is 13. Since they were both negative, the 13 is going to be negative as well. Now if I go to this problem right here, negative 4 plus 1, there the signs are opposite, so we subtract. 4 take away 1 is 3. The 4 is larger and it was negative, so this is going to be negative 3. Then between this problem and this problem is that subtraction, so you want to make sure you bring that subtraction symbol down. So here's what we end up with in those brackets. Now when I go to simplify the brackets, I've got a minus minus, that double negative, so minus minus becomes plus plus. So this is really negative 13 plus a positive 3. Opposite signs, so subtract. 13 take away 3 is 10. The 13 was larger and it was negative, so this 10 is going to stay negative. So everything in the brackets turns into a negative 10. Finally, I want to add to that negative 8 that was out front. A negative plus a negative. So here we want to add. 8 and 10 is 18. They were both negative, so my answer stays negative. Okay, in our last example here, we have another simplification problem and translation problem. Here we want 19 less than the difference between 9 and negative 2. This is a tough problem. Right away you see that phrase less than. It's not is less than, it's just less than, and less than means subtract. And we have to be a little bit careful here, because when we subtract, we actually need to subtract in the opposite order of the way the problem was written in English, because I want to take 19 less than stuff. So if this is my stuff, I want to take 19 away from it. Okay, so that's initially how you want to start it out. The 19 came first in English, but it comes second after the minus sign. So whenever you see that phrase less than, switch the order around. Now what are we taking that 19 away from? Another difference. A difference between 9 and negative 2. Difference also means subtract. So we want to subtract 9 and negative 2. So 9 minus negative 2. If you want to be really careful here, since we wanted all this stuff minus 19, you might want to use parentheses. So this, written out a little bit cleaner, would be parentheses 9 minus negative 2 minus 19. Now to actually simplify the problem, right away, starting in those parentheses, I see that double negative, so I can change this to plus plus. 9 plus 2 is just 11. And now 11 minus 19, if you need to, you can change that to 11 plus negative 19, but really all you see is that one negative in front of the 19, so we have a positive and a negative, so you subtract. 19 take away 11 is 8. The 19 was bigger, it was the one that was negative, so our answer is negative. So our final solution is negative 8. This concludes our lecture on adding and subtracting real numbers. Good luck.